In 1890, you could be born, work, shop, live, and die without ever leaving one man's property. The trick wasn't building factories. The trick was building the world around them. And here's where the money actually moved. Industrialists realized that controlling housing, stores, saloons, and courts meant controlling workers' entire financial lives. Every dollar a laborer earned came straight back to the company. Pullman, Illinois, Homestead, Pennsylvania, Scranton, these weren't towns that grew organically around industry. They were built from scratch as closed economic systems. But how did a single company convince thousands of people to live inside a cage they couldn't see? Start with the labor shortage. In the 1870s and 1880s, factories exploded across America, but workers didn't. Coal mines needed thousands. Steel mills needed thousands more. Industrialists couldn't wait for towns to form naturally. They needed workers now, so they built housing themselves right next to the plant. But here's the trick: they didn't sell the houses, they rented them exclusively to employees. Rent was deducted straight from paychecks. What problem did this solve for the company? Predictable cash flow. If a worker lived in company housing, the company knew exactly how much money was coming back before the laborer ever saw it. Rent was automatically deducted. No collection risk, no eviction paperwork, but housing was just the foundation. The real system was the company store. Workers were paid in cash, sure, but the company store was the only option for miles. Bread, clothing, tools, medicine, all priced 20 to 40% higher than outside markets. The worker had no choice. He lived in company housing, worked for company wages, and spent those wages at the company store. His family ate company food, they wore company-sold clothes. And here's the trick: when a laborer fell behind on store debt, the company could dock future wages or evict him. He was trapped by arithmetic. But the company store was only one revenue stream. What about law enforcement, entertainment, liquor? In company towns, the company owned the saloon, it owned the church, it owned the schoolhouse. Some companies even minted their own scrip, company-issued currency that was only redeemable at company stores. Workers couldn't take it elsewhere. It was money that never left the system. Pullman, Illinois is the textbook case. George Pullman built it in 1880 as a model town. The phrase itself was marketing genius. He controlled 4,000 acres. Every building was company property. Rent, food, utilities, entertainment, all funneled back to the Pullman Company. Workers lived comfortably by the standards of the era, but comfort was the product being sold, not freedom. Why did Pullman care if his workers were comfortable if they couldn't leave? Because a comfortable worker was a productive worker, and a worker who owned nothing was a controllable worker. Pullman kept rents deliberately high, about 25% of a worker's wage. Why? So the worker could never save enough to leave. He was locked in by the mathematics of survival. When business slowed, Pullman cut wages but not rents. Workers suddenly couldn't afford to stay or go. That's when the system cracked. In 1894, the Pullman Strike. Workers refused to work. The company brought in federal troops. Soldiers killed workers in the streets of town they weren't even allowed to own. But here's the trick: even during the strike, Pullman kept collecting rent. He evicted families from company housing while their sons were still in jail. The town itself became a weapon. Homestead, Pennsylvania operated the same way. Andrew Carnegie's steel mill. Workers lived in company housing, shopped at company stores, owed their survival to company decisions. When Carnegie cut wages in 1892, workers struck. The company hired Pinkerton agents, private security, to shoot strikers. Again, the town's physical infrastructure became an instrument of control. But the company town model wasn't just about wages and rents. It was about ideology. Industrialists marketed these towns as utopias, safe, orderly, paternalistic. Workers were told they were part of a family. In reality, they were part of a closed financial loop. The company controlled housing, so it controlled where you lived. It controlled stores, so it controlled what you bought. It controlled courts, so it controlled what happened when you complained. Some companies even employed spotters, workers hired to report on other workers' behavior and loyalty. Political dissent could get you evicted. Union organizing could get you blacklisted. The company town wasn't just an economic system. It was a surveillance state built on real estate. Now, where did the profit actually go? Rent revenue, store markups, scrip that never left circulation, utilities charged at inflated rates, school fees, saloon revenue, fines for rule breaking. Every transaction in the town flowed upward to the company. A worker earning $2 a day might see $1.50 of it come back to the company through rent alone. That's 75% of wages recycled into company coffers. And here's the trick: it was legal. There were no wage laws, no housing regulations, no consumer protections. The company could charge whatever it wanted for rent and goods because the worker had nowhere else to go. The town's isolation was the feature, not a bug. It was the business model. By the early 1900s, the company town model began to crack. Labor movements grew. States passed housing regulations. The Interstate Commerce Act limited certain corporate powers. Company towns didn't disappear, they evolved. But the principle survived: control the physical space, control the worker. The company town was never about building community. It was about building a closed financial system where the company captured every dollar of worker output and redirected it back to itself. Workers weren't employees living in a town. They were residents of a company-owned economy. The buildings, streets, and stores were all props in a transaction designed to extract maximum value from human labor. Though back to the original question, how did industrialists convince thousands to live inside a cage they couldn't see? They didn't. Workers knew, but they had no choice. The company town wasn't deceptive because it was invisible. It was deceptive because it was presented as benevolent, as care, as order, as safety. In reality, it was a financial machine designed to recirculate wages back to capital. And it worked until workers organized, laws changed, and alternatives became available. The company town model proved that when a single entity controls housing, commerce, and law, profit margins become unlimited. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Subscribe for more unseen financial architectures that shaped how we work and live today. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.